Verify. So a big verify problem. We have cosine 3x. We are going to work with the left-hand side because with the right-hand side, you could factor out a cosine, but then you're going to have 4 cosine squared minus 3, and there's not really anywhere to go from there. So here's how we're going to handle having 3x inside here. We're going to say that this is the same thing as cosine of 2x plus x. Okay, right, because that's 3x. So then we're going to use our cosine sum identity, which means we're going to take the cosine of the first angle times the sine of the second minus the cosine, that's not right, cosine identity. Cosine is cosine cosine minus sine sine. So cosine 2x, cosine x minus sine 2x sine x. All right, so not really 4 cosine cubed x, but minus 3 cosine x. And then what we see is we can do this again. We have cosine 2x here. We have a sine 2x here. And so I could rewrite those as cosine parentheses x plus x, cosine x minus sine parentheses x plus x times sine x. So again, using my identities. Cosine x plus x is going to be cosine x times cosine x minus sine x times sine x. That's in a parentheses because that's all being multiplied by this blue cosine x. Then for my second part, I'm going to do on like the next line. So minus sine x plus x is going to be sine x cosine x plus sine x cosine x all times sine x. So I did my original identity for cosine x plus 2x. I wrote down all the parts. That gave me a cosine 2x and a sine 2x. So now I'm using those two identities, the sum identities. Trying to look at those real quick and make sure I didn't make a mistake. And then I have to distribute. So, and actually for this first one, yeah, I think I'll distribute. I have a cosine times a cosine squared. So it's going to be cosine to the third. Then I have a cosine times a negative sine squared. So I'm just going to write that as minus cosine x times sine squared x. Then I have minus a sine squared x times cosine x. And I have minus a sine squared x cosine x. So I have two of those. Right. Sine x cosine x plus sine x cosine x is 2 sine x cosine x. And then distribute times sine, so 2 sine squared cosine x. All right, these are like terms. Cosine times sine squared, cosine times sine squared. So I have minus 1 and minus 2, so I have minus 3 cosine x times sine squared x. Still have that cosine cubed x out front. And then if I look at my final answer, it's all in terms of cosine. So I'm going to take this sine squared and rewrite that as 1 minus cosine squared x, because sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. And so if I distribute, my original is going to be cosine cubed x. Then I'm going to distribute this negative 3 cosine x times 1. and this negative 3 cosine x times negative cosine squared x, which is plus 3 cosine cubed x. So I have cosine cubed plus 3 cosine cubed is 4 cosine cubed minus 3 cosine x, and I'm done. That's what I wanted. Some books will use like cosine 3x, sine 3x. They call it a multiple angle identity, but it's really, there's no point in memorizing it. It is a good practice just kind of going through and working out the identity though.